The god of love had never been wounded by his own Eros. For eons uncounted, he had watched from gilded shadows as mortals and immortals alike fell helpless before his power. A single shaft from his bow could make kings abandon kingdoms, warriors desert battlefields, and gods themselves forsake their thrones for the arms of shepherdesses and river nymphs. Eros was the great puppeteer, the invisible hand that guided hearts toward their fates, beautiful and terrible and utterly untouched by the chaos he created. He made others burn. He himself remained cold, until the night he crept into a mortal princess's chamber with poison in his quiver and destruction in his heart, and accidentally pricked himself on his own arrow. This is that story, the story of how love learned what it meant to love, and how a mortal woman with no divine blood, no special powers, no weapons save her own stubborn heart, accomplished what no hero before her had managed. She made a god kneel. But to understand how the god of love fell, we must first understand the woman who caught him. Her name was Psyche, and she was the youngest of 3 princesses in a kingdom whose name the ages have forgotten. Her sisters were beautiful in the ordinary way of royalty, pleasant enough to look upon and dutiful in their marriages to neighboring kings. Psyche was something else entirely. Poets who attempted to describe her threw down their lyres in frustration. Sculptors who tried to capture her likeness wept at their failures. She had the kind of beauty that does not simply please the eye but wounds the soul. People who saw her felt something shift inside them, some fundamental understanding of what loveliness could be, and they walked away changed. They walked away ruined for ordinary beauty forever. Word of this mortal princess spread across the ancient world like fire through dry grass. Pilgrims began arriving at her father's palace, not to trade or treat with the king, but simply to glimpse his youngest daughter. They brought offerings. They knelt before her. They called her the new Aphrodite, a goddess made flesh, more beautiful even than the foam-born queen of love herself. The temples of Aphrodite grew dusty and silent. The altars that should have smoked with incense and trembled with sacrifice stood cold and neglected. Why worship a goddess in some distant heaven when a goddess walked the earth in mortal form? On Olympus, Aphrodite noticed. The goddess of love and beauty was not known for her forgiving nature. She had started wars over slights less grievous than this. She had transformed rivals into monsters, driven men to madness, and toppled kingdoms for the crime of insufficient devotion. And now, some mortal girl, some brief flash of humanity that would wither and die in a handful of decades, was stealing her worship. The insult was intolerable. Aphrodite summoned her son. Eros came when called, as he always did. He was beautiful in the way fire is beautiful, golden and dangerous and difficult to look at directly. His wings caught the light of Olympus and scattered it into rainbows. His smile could charm the stars from the sky. But beneath that beauty was something that even the gods feared. Eros was old. Older than Aphrodite herself, some said. Older than Olympus, one of the primordial forces that had emerged from chaos at the very beginning of existence. Love predates the gods. Love will outlast them. And Eros, for all his youthful appearance, carried that ancient power in every arrow he loosed. His mother's instructions were simple. Find the mortal girl. Use your arrows to make her fall in love with the most wretched creature on earth. A beggar, a criminal, a monster. Something so far beneath her station that her beauty would become a curse, a source of endless humiliation rather than worship. Destroy her, not by killing her, but by degrading her. Make the world laugh at the new Aphrodite who gave herself to filth. Eros accepted the task without question. He had done worse for pettier reasons. One more mortal ruined by love was nothing to a god who had ruined thousands. He found Psyche sleeping. The journey had been nothing, a flutter of golden wings across the mortal realm, and then he was there, invisible and silent in her moonlit chamber. She lay on a couch of carved ivory, her dark hair spread across silk pillows, her breath soft and even in the peace of innocent dreams. Eros moved closer, arrow already knocked, ready to complete his mother's vengeance in a single instant. And then she stirred. Perhaps she sensed him somehow, the presence of something divine in her mortal space. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. Her lips parted as if to speak some secret to the night. And Eros, god of love, looked upon her face and felt his own arrow bite into his hand. It was an accident, a moment of distraction, a careless grip, and the golden point drew a single drop of divine ichor from his finger. Such a small wound, such an insignificant thing. But the arrows of Eros carry love in their very metal, and not even the god who wielded them was immune to their power. He looked at Psyche, and he loved her. Instantly, completely, with the same devastating totality he had inflicted on countless others. The god of love fled into the night like a common thief, leaving his mission unfulfilled and his heart in the hands of a mortal woman who did not even know he existed. What followed was agony of a kind Eros had never imagined. He was used to watching love from the outside, observing its effects on others with the detachment of a scientist studying specimens. Now, he was the specimen. He could not eat. He could not rest. He spent his days pacing the halls of his mother's palace, his nights hovering invisible outside Psyche's window, watching her sleep and hating himself for watching and unable to stop. Aphrodite noticed her son's distraction but did not suspect its cause. She assumed he was simply delayed in completing her revenge and sent increasingly sharp reminders. Eros ignored them all. Meanwhile, Psyche suffered in her own way. Her beauty, which had seemed such a gift, revealed itself as the curse it had always been. Men worshipped her. They wrote poems to her. They crossed oceans merely to look upon her. But none of them married her. Her sisters, ordinary and forgettable, had been wed to kings within months of reaching marriageable age. Psyche remained alone. It was as if her beauty was too terrifying for mortal men to claim. They could adore her from a distance, but they could not imagine holding such a creature in their arms. She was not a woman to them, she was an icon, and icons are meant to be venerated, not loved. Her father, desperate and confused, consulted the oracle of Apollo. The answer that came back was terrible. "Your daughter is destined for no mortal husband," the oracle pronounced. "Dress her for a funeral, not a wedding. Carry her to the high cliff at the edge of your kingdom. Leave her there for the monster that will claim her. A serpent creature, fierce and cruel, who makes even the gods tremble. This is the bridegroom fate has chosen." The kingdom mourned. Psyche was dressed in white, the color of both brides and corpses, and led in procession to the lonely cliff. Her parents wept. Her sisters tore their hair. Psyche herself walked with strange calm toward what she believed was her death. Perhaps she had always known her beauty would destroy her. Perhaps she was simply tired of being worshipped and never touched. When they left her on that windswept rock, she did not beg them to stay. She watched them descend the mountain path, growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. Then she waited for her monster. What came instead was the west wind. Zephyrus, gentlest of the winds, lifted her from the cliff and carried her through the sky as tenderly as a mother carries a sleeping child. She drifted over mountains and forests, over rivers that glittered like silver ribbons in the fading light, until at last she came to rest in a valley that mortal eyes had never seen. Before her stood a palace that made her father's court look like a peasant's hovel. Walls of gold and silver rose toward the heavens. Gardens bloomed with flowers that existed nowhere else in the world. Fountains sang with water that sparkled like liquid diamonds, and the doors stood open, as if the palace had been waiting for her all along. Inside, invisible servants attended to her every need. Voices without bodies offered her food and wine and drew her baths of perfumed water. A feast appeared before her, richer than any she had known, though she could not see the hands that prepared it. And when night fell, when the lamps burned low and darkness filled the magnificent halls, something else came to her chamber. He came in darkness and spoke with a voice like honey and thunder. He did not tell her his name. He did not let her see his face. He came to her bed and loved her with a tenderness that mortal men could not have imagined. And before dawn he departed again, leaving her alone with the ghost of his touch and the ache of questions she was forbidden to ask. "Do not try to see me," he warned her, his breath warm against her ear in the final moments before sunrise. "Trust me. Love me. Ask nothing more. If you look upon my face, you will lose me forever." Days passed, then weeks, then what might have been months, though time moved strangely in that enchanted valley. Psyche lived in luxury beyond description. She lacked nothing except companionship during the daylight hours. Her invisible husband came to her every night, and each night she fell more deeply in love with him, with his voice, his gentleness, the way he spoke to her as if she were the most precious thing in existence. But doubt is a slow poison, and loneliness makes that poison work faster. She began to wonder. What was he hiding? Why the darkness? Always the darkness. The oracle had promised her a monster. What if the oracle had been right? What if she lay each night in the arms of some terrible serpent, some horror that only seemed tender because she could not see its true form? The thought lodged in her mind and would not leave. Her sisters came to visit. Zephyrus carried them to the valley at Psyche's request, and they wandered through the golden palace with eyes sharp with envy and hearts poisoned with jealousy. Their own husbands were old and ordinary. Their own palaces were mere stone. And here was little Psyche, the curse of the family, the girl too beautiful to marry, living like a goddess and speaking of a husband who worshipped her. They could not bear it, so they planted seeds of doubt. "You have never seen him," they whispered. "What manner of husband hides from his wife?" The oracle spoke of a monster. What if it spoke true? What if you share your bed with something unspeakable, something that is merely fattening you for the slaughter? You must see him, you must know. Take a lamp and a knife to your chamber tonight. Light the lamp while he sleeps. See what you have married. And if it is a monster, kill it before it kills you. Psyche resisted, she argued, she wept. But her sister's words worked through her defenses like water through stone, and by the time Zephyrus carried them away, her resolve had crumbled. That night, when her husband came to her and loved her, and fell into satisfied sleep beside her, she rose from the bed. Her hands trembled as she lit the lamp. The flame caught, flickered, steadied. She lifted it high and turned to look upon the creature she had married. What she saw was not a monster. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs and weakened her knees until she nearly fell. Golden curls spread across the pillow, features so perfect they seemed carved by divine hands. Wings folded against a muscled back, their feathers soft as clouds. And at his side, a quiver of arrows and a bow that she recognized from 1,000 temple paintings. Eros, the god of love himself. She had been married to a god all along, and now, looking upon him in the lamplight, she understood why he had hidden. Not because he was a monster, because he was too beautiful for mortal eyes to bear. The lamp trembled in her shaking hands. A drop of hot oil fell. It landed on his shoulder, and the god woke with a cry of pain and betrayal. He saw the lamp. He saw his wife standing over him with light in her hands and guilt on her face. And his eyes, those eyes that had looked upon her with such love in the darkness, filled with something far worse than anger. They filled with sorrow. "You have broken us," he said. His voice was quiet, final. "I disobeyed my mother for you. I gave you everything a god could give. I asked only for trust, and you could not give even that." His wings unfurled. The window burst open, and Eros, god of love, flew out into the night and did not look back. The palace dissolved around Psyche like morning mist, and she found herself alone on a barren hillside, the lamp cold in her hands. The memory of his face burned forever into her mind. What followed was the long road back. Psyche did not accept her loss. She could not. She had seen the god of love in his full glory, and having seen him, she could not simply go home and marry some mortal prince and pretend her heart had never been claimed by divinity. She would find him, she would win him back, she would do whatever was required. Her quest took her across the mortal world and into realms that mortals should never enter. She sought help from Demeter, goddess of harvest, but Demeter would not risk Aphrodite's wrath. She sought help from Hera, queen of the gods, but Hera too turned her away. Finally, inevitably, Psyche went where she had always been going. She went to Aphrodite herself. The goddess of love received her rival with cold satisfaction. "So, the mortal beauty who stole my worship and corrupted my son has come crawling to my feet. How pleasing, how appropriate. You want my son? Very well, prove yourself worthy of him. Complete the tasks I set before you. Succeed, and perhaps I will consider your case. Fail, and you are mine to do with as I wish." The first task was impossible. Aphrodite led Psyche to a vast storehouse filled with a mountain of mixed grain: wheat, barley, millet, poppy seeds, lentils, beans, all heaped together in chaotic confusion. "Sort them," the goddess commanded. "Every grain in its proper pile. You have until nightfall." Then she departed, laughing at the hopelessness of the demand. Psyche sat before the mountain of grain and wept. Hours passed. She could not have sorted even a handful in the time allotted, but as she wept, something stirred in the shadows of the storehouse. Ants. Thousands upon thousands of tiny ants, streaming in from cracks in the walls, summoned by some power that Psyche did not understand. Perhaps Eros, from wherever he watched in his wounded hiding, had sent them. Perhaps the gods themselves had grown tired of Aphrodite's cruelty. The ants worked through the day with mechanical precision, and by nightfall, every grain stood in its proper pile. Aphrodite returned to find the task completed. Her eyes narrowed with rage, but she said nothing. There would be other tasks. The second seemed equally impossible. Across a river that cut through Aphrodite's domain, there grazed a flock of sheep with fleece of pure gold. But these were no ordinary sheep. They were fierce, carnivorous, and had killed every mortal foolish enough to approach them. "Bring me a sample of their golden fleece," Aphrodite commanded. Psyche went to the riverbank, fully expecting to die. But as she stood there, the reeds along the shore whispered to her, "Wait until afternoon. When the sun is high, the sheep drowse in the shade. Then you may gather the golden wool that catches on the briars. Follow their advice, and you will live." Psyche listened. She waited. And when she returned to Aphrodite with handfuls of golden fleece, the goddess's rage deepened. A third task was set, more dangerous still. At the top of a cliff from which no mortal had ever returned, there flowed a stream that fed the rivers of the underworld itself. The water was guarded by dragons that never slept. "Bring me a flask of that water," Aphrodite demanded. This time, surely, the mortal girl would die. But as Psyche climbed toward that terrible summit, an eagle descended from the clouds. Some say it was Zeus's own eagle, sent by the king of gods who had grown weary of watching Aphrodite torture an innocent woman. The eagle took the flask from her hands, soared past the dragons with the predator's ease, and filled it with the black water of the Styx. Psyche returned to Aphrodite once more, and once more the goddess was thwarted. The final task was the cruelest. "Go to the underworld," Aphrodite commanded. "Go to Persephone herself and ask for a portion of her beauty, sealed in this box. Bring it back to me." This was no simple errand. This was a death sentence dressed as a chore. Mortals who entered the underworld did not return. Even heroes required divine assistance and legendary courage. Psyche was neither hero nor goddess. She was merely a woman who loved too much. She went anyway. She found a tower that knew the paths to the realm of the dead, and it taught her the secrets she would need: how to pay the ferrymen, how to pacify Cerberus, how to refuse the hospitality of Hades, which would trap her there forever. Psyche descended into the darkness with coins for Charon and cakes for the three-headed hound, and she walked through fields of asphodel where the shades of the dead watched her with hollow eyes. She came before Persephone, queen of the underworld, and made her strange request. And Persephone, who understood something about being caught between worlds, took pity on her. She filled the box and sent the mortal woman back toward the light. Psyche should have returned directly to Aphrodite. She should have handed over the box and completed her final task. But she had been through so much. She had walked through death itself. And she thought, as she climbed back toward the world of the living, that perhaps she should open the box. Just a little. Just to take a touch of divine beauty for herself. Not vanity, simply a desire to be worthy of the god she loved. She opened the box. Inside was not beauty, but the sleep of death. It rose around her like a fog, and Psyche collapsed on the path between worlds, neither alive nor dead, frozen in the moment of her greatest mistake. But love was watching. Love had been watching all along. Eros had healed from his wound. He had raged and mourned and finally forgiven, and he had followed his wife's journey through impossible tasks with growing admiration and renewed devotion. When she fell, he descended. He gathered the deadly sleep back into its box. He lifted Psyche in his arms and carried her to the very peak of Olympus. Before the throne of Zeus himself, Eros made his case. He had disobeyed Aphrodite. He had married a mortal without permission. But he loved her. He would always love her. And she had proved herself worthy of that love through trials that would have broken any hero. She had walked into the underworld and walked out again. She had earned her place among them. Zeus looked at the god of love and the mortal woman in his arms. He looked at Aphrodite, whose anger had finally exhausted itself, and he made his judgment. Psyche would become immortal. She would drink ambrosia and join the ranks of the divine. She would be Eros's wife for eternity, not in shadows and secrecy, but openly, acknowledged by all of Olympus. Even Aphrodite relented, for having a goddess as a daughter-in-law was less humiliating than having a mortal. They married properly this time, with all the gods in attendance and feasting that lasted for days. And in time, Psyche bore Eros a daughter. They named her Hedon, which means pleasure. The soul and love united produced joy. But here is what most people miss about this story. It is not simply a tale of love and trials and eventual triumph. It is an allegory. The Greeks and Romans who told it understood that Psyche means soul, and Eros, the god of love, represented something beyond romantic attachment. He represented divine love, the kind that transcends mortality. The story of Psyche and Eros is the story of the human soul's journey toward union with the divine. We begin in beauty and innocence, unaware of what we seek. We are wounded by love, afflicted by it, transformed by it. We lose our way. We doubt. We make mistakes that seem unforgivable. But if we persist, if we endure the impossible tasks that love sets before us, if we descend into our own underworlds and emerge again, we are transformed. We become worthy of what we sought. We become, in some small way, divine ourselves. This is why the story endures. It appears in cultures across the world under different names, always telling the same essential truth: Beauty and the Beast. East of the sun, west of the moon. The girl who marries an animal bridegroom, loses him through broken trust, and must journey to the ends of the earth to reclaim him. The pattern is ancient, it may be eternal, because it speaks to something universal in human experience: the fear that we are not worthy of love. The discovery that worthiness is earned through struggle. The hope that even our worst mistakes can be redeemed. In our modern world, we tend to think of love as something that happens to us. A lightning bolt from the blue, an arrow from an unseen bow. We fall in love. The language itself is passive, suggesting that we have no control over the process. But Psyche's story offers a different model. Love is not just something that strikes us. It is something we build through action. Through trust, yes, but also through the repair of broken trust. Through devotion that survives betrayal. Through the willingness to walk into darkness because the alternative is living without what we love. Eros fired his arrow by accident. That was chance, fate, the unpredictable chaos of divine comedy. But everything that followed was choice. He chose to hide, she chose to look, he chose to flee, she chose to follow. They both chose, in the end, to forgive. And in that forgiveness, in that mutual decision to try again despite everything, they created something stronger than the original passion. They created a love that had been tested and had endured. They created marriage in the truest sense, not a ceremony but a commitment renewed through crisis. The god of love learned, in loving Psyche, what his Eros had always done to others. He learned that love is not power but vulnerability. That to truly love is to hand someone the weapon that could destroy you, and trust them not to use it. When Psyche lit that lamp, she did use it. She wounded him as surely as his own arrows had wounded her. But wounds heal. Trust can be rebuilt. And sometimes the love that survives betrayal is stronger than the love that never faced it. Somewhere on Olympus they still dwell together. Eros with his golden wings and mischievous smile. Psyche with the beauty that once stopped temples and now illuminates heaven itself. Their daughter Hedone brings pleasure wherever she goes. The god of love is no longer cold. He has felt his own fire. He has burned and healed and learned that burning is not the end of things. And perhaps that is the final lesson. That love, real love, the kind worth having, is never safe. It will ask everything of you. It will send you to sort impossible mountains of grain, to gather fleece from murderous sheep, to descend into the realm of the dead itself. It will wound you and flee from you and force you to prove yourself worthy through suffering you never anticipated. But if you endure, if you do not give up, if you choose love again and again despite every reason to walk away, you will be transformed, not into a god perhaps, but into something more than you were. The mortal woman Psyche was beautiful. The goddess Psyche is radiant. The difference is everything she suffered in between. And somewhere, always, there is an arrow nocked and a bow half drawn, and a god of love who knows now what it costs to fire. He still shoots. He cannot help himself. It is his nature, and love must go on finding new hearts to wound and heal and transform. But now, when he takes aim, he understands. He knows what he is doing to them. And perhaps, in some small way, he is gentler than he used to be. Perhaps the god who fell in love learned compassion along with everything else. The arrow flies, the heart opens, the journey begins, as it always has, as it always will.